Like, that's a very addict thing. Like, I need to get with the most dramatic woman. You know, I need to be where the action is happening. And that's exciting, and it's intoxicating, and it's ultimately a distraction for whatever emotional issues you're having, because you don't have to sit with yourself and deal with yourself. The next must-watch of the summer, which is Roadrunner, the new Bourdain documentary. That thing is rife with so much archival footage. It was shocking just how much of Anthony Bourdain's trajectory was captured on film, because the documentary tracks his arc from the early days when he was the chef at Les Halles, I think that's how you say it, all the way through all of his successes and ultimately his demise. And I love the documentary. Jeff Gordinier invited me to a press screening when I was in New York City the week before it came out. It's now out in theaters now. I don't think it's streaming, but I'm sure it will be soon. I was very moved by this. I mean, I would suspect, like you, Anthony Bourdain, you know, holds a large place in my consciousness. His passing was a tough one, I think, for all of us. And I don't quite know what it is about him, but he was able to connect with so many people in such a profound, meaningful way. And I think the documentary does a really good job of helping you understand who this guy was and what made him tick. You have not had a chance to see this
I
yet.
have not seen it yet because it's not streaming and I only stay at home.
You're here now.
Oh, wait. I got outside
You're here now.
a little bit. I go home or to the beach, Rich. That's what I do.
You've never met Anthony Bourdain. I've never met him.
No, I never met him. But, you know, as us Lonely Planet writers, like, we're like the road warrior hacks of yore. Going to places that he's gone to with his crew and eating some of, you know, in these similar restaurants and finding that, like, ethnic food that nobody see, you know, that Jonathan Gold here in LA and the Anthony Bourdain overseas aesthetic it figures prominently in almost all Lonely Planet writers. I mean, that's what we aspired to and did in our own way and expressed in our own way. So very kindred spirit stuff there. And obviously the work itself is great. And then he's got the kind of somewhat Taoist, Eastern philosophy that he's appropriated is the wrong word, but that because he actually cared about it and studied it, and so I can relate to that. And so definitely when he died, it was shocking, to be honest with you, and sad. But someone I always have admired and continue to admire. And I'll watch anything with him in it. So I'm really looking forward to this.
Yeah, just utterly compelling to watch him. A captivating, charismatic personality who had this expansive joy for experiences of all kinds. And irrespective of however successful he became, was really just like one of us. Like, he was an everyman, and he was much more interested in having a conversation with a random guy on the street than he was about going to some Velvet Rope event.
Yeah.
And I think what's interesting about him, and the documentary affirms, like, this take that I've always had, which is that this guy essentially was an untreated alcoholic. I mean, I'm convinced that this was the case.
Big drinker.
So he had this heroin problem. He kicked heroin. He kicked hard drugs, as far as
without going to Narcotics Anonymous, right?
But he's this extreme personality, and that ism inside of him divorced itself from hardcore substances, but remained active and would latch on to anything and everything that could kind of take him out of whatever emotional disaffectation he was experiencing. And that extremism made him this larger than life personality. But so it was in many ways his strength and what endeared all of us to him so profoundly, but also ultimately, paved the way for his demise. I mean, he continued to drink and, smoke pot, stuff like that. So it wasn't like he actually got sober. But you see over the course of this documentary how he latches on to certain, not just substances, but people, experiences. Like, he goes from, being just the guy who just smokes like crazy to being an insane jujitsu practitioner, and that becomes his obsession. a healthier obsession, of course, than some of his other ones, travel experiences that obviously underscore, why those television shows that he did, impacted so many people. But, a brooding, dark guy who was an incredible writer and an incredible friend.
And thinker.
The person who would really invest a lot of time into his friendships and really was curious about what made other people tick, and, really appreciated his friends, I think, in a way that we can all learn from. But I think ultimately where it all really begins to unravel is when he gets involved with Aja Argento near the end, and she becomes his obsession. And he remarks early in that relationship a self-awareness that this potentially could be his demise. And the documentary, I won't spoil it, but it kind of plays this out. And you see how everything starts to line up for him to meet his fateful end.
Was he an escapist? Because I think about escapism a lot, because I think I have that in me.
Well, I think escapism can mean different things. I mean, I look at it, as I always say, through the lens of recovery and addiction. And I just see somebody who was an untreated addict and had a profound, whether it's a hole in your spirit or an inability to just sit with yourself, that drove a lot of those wild experiences and compelled him to go to places other people wouldn't go, like Beirut when it's, being bombed and places like that. That's part of, that's a very addict thing. I need to be where the action is. I need to get with the most dramatic woman. I need to be where the action is happening. And that's exciting and it's intoxicating and it's ultimately a distraction for whatever emotional issues you're having, because you don't have to sit with yourself and deal with yourself. And you see the pain and the tension between that pull, that drive inside of him, and the fact that he has a wife and he has a kid, and what's the right word for it? The kind of he tortures himself over his relationship with his child, in that he's not sure he's being a good dad, and he so desperately wants to be a good dad, and yet he has this huge life that all of us look at and say, I would be happy if I had that life. And you realize that life is disconnected from whether or not you're going to be happy, because that's the relationship between you and it has nothing to do with the externalities that are swirling around that guy or any of us.
Having lived on the road for 8 months a year for 7-8 years as a Lonely Planet author, 8-9 months, and you're chasing cool destinations and going weirder and weirder places that I call it weirder and weirder, more unusual places. It's a better way of putting it. To get further and further away from the known world, our own culture and our own selves. A lot of people called that the dream job. Most people wouldn't last 1 year doing that. To last 7 or 8 years was a lot for me. There's people out there still doing it that I know, although the pandemic has halted a lot of those contracts, but most people would not last 1 year. And when the New York Times had the 52 Places journalists, and a lot of them have written about it afterwards, and a lot of them were, so far I think they were pretty exhausted by the end, and wouldn't necessarily recommend it as a great lifestyle.
Lonely Planet, lonely writer.
Well, it's like Jeff Gordner said about needing a healthier lifestyle after years of eating and being a great food critic. And, he taps into some of that same stuff. It's different than that because we're not getting that same, but you do get some of those meals, so you do have a little bit because we're writing about food, but we're also staying in crappy places and nice places. We're on the ferries, we're on the rickety airplanes you read about. I can't tell you how many Indonesia flights I took, and after every trip to Indonesia, because Indonesia has a very bad air safety record, you could look it up, it's not good at all. And after every trip over there, when I've done 30 domestic flights, I'm happy that I made it out, like that kind of stuff. But that's part of the appeal too. Yeah. But in the end, there is an element I want to do that. I love the fact I live in a small place in LA and I can open the door and the doors to the whole world. But you do lose my situation came with a failed marriage. It came with missing lots of weddings and of friends. It came with missing birthdays and holidays. And I couldn't imagine doing that with Zoom at home now.
Sure.
And so yeah,
you're also not an addict. You know what I mean? Like,
Well,
imagine
I
the guy who's like,
Right.
oh my God, I'm going to get on this plane and it might crash. Like, let's get in it.
Right,
That's
right.
the difference.
Right.